Welcome back. It's time for the Age of Exploration. If you want, you can go ahead and go to the resources page under your Haiku Learning and download the Age of Exploration PowerPoint, follow along with me, or you can just watch this video. The first thing is the historical settings for exploration. The end of the Middle Ages had afforded the Europeans numerous opportunities to interact with trade and with Asia. Contacts made as a result of the Crusades demonstrated to the Europeans some of the many benefits they could gain by trading with both the Near and Far East. Europeans developed a taste for the goods that could be found in the East, but overland trade routes were costly and required an enormous amount of time. You had to carry it, pack it, move it, sell it multiple times. There were several distinct spheres that were acknowledged by the end of the late to Middle Ages: Europe, the Muslim world, and Asia. These are whole sections of their own. While each of these was seen as independent of the others, much contact and interactions occurred between these different spheres. During the Middle Ages, the Vikings probably discovered the New World, long before Christopher Columbus even set sail. Uh, there was exploration under such Viking explorers and settlers as Eric the Red and Leif Erikson, and they probably did reach the Western Hemisphere, which resulted in establishment of short-lived settlements in what they called Newfoundland, also known as Vinland. There are also some who suggest that the Chinese may have reached the coast of America. Marco Polo returned to Europe with tales that China could be reached by water, and so therefore they had an idea of maybe you could reach it. Let's talk about the Renaissance. Now, I know we covered a whole lot about the Renaissance, but it really plays into this. Exploration was particularly fueled by the development of ideas of the Renaissance that had been discussed since the late to Middle Ages. While most educated Renaissance humanists believed that the world was round, there was little real understanding of the size of the circumference of Earth, nor any reason to believe that a separate world existed in the Western Hemisphere. Stories of the mythical Christian king Prester John, who uh, reportedly lived in Africa or Asia, the lost continent of Atlantis, and a Japanese island called Cipangu, all enticed Europeans to embark upon voyages of exploration. While these stories may have motivated some early explorers, there was no real sense that the New World would be discovered. As the feudal era came to a close in most regions of Europe, several significant economic developments occurred that helped contribute to the developing of ideas and the motives of exploration. Although feudalism had resulted in a decline in the environment, limited trade had occurred between the villages and the manors along the traditional and emerging trade routes. Italian ships sailed the Mediterranean to participate in trade with Asia, and northern traders sailed between the English and the Baltic coast, and France, and Germany, and the lower countries. Finally, an important north-south trade route developed between the Italian city-states and northern Europe. This route included both sea lanes and a land route over the Alps. Sea lanes came to play an increasingly important role because overland trade route was very slow and extremely expensive. Europeans desired many things from the East. They enjoyed silk and porcelain from China. They desired many of the exotic spices that could be found in the East, spices like cinnamon, cloves, pepper, and nutmeg. However, the difficulty of transporting a long overland route made these very costly and very troublesome to get. The growth of commerce in the Middle Ages made it impossible to continue the barter system, and a new coin system was beginning to emerge, such as the Florentine in Florin. The increased use of money created a demand for the banks. Those jobs originally was set up to exchange one set of coin money for another, but later banks began to create a place where people could store their money and their wealth. And some banks were established to create systems to loan money to people, including monarchs. You see how this is leading into the Medici family and all the great bankers who ruled that area. Ships. Caravels were round-hulled ships that could carry heavy armaments. They were small, shallow draft ships that were capable of handling ocean travel. Europeans used different sort of technology that had been developed in the preceding centuries to improve sustainability and maneuverability of their ships. This included the incorporation of a sternpost rudder, which had diffused from China, and the use of both the square and lateen sails, which were triangular in shape. Remember, the lateen sails allowed them to sail towards the wind. These two types of sails allowed maritime explorers to navigate oceans regardless of the direction of their wind. Using gunpowder developed by the Chinese and improved metallurgy, uh, sorry, back that up. Using gunpowder developed by the Chinese and improved metallurgy. Okay, had that one right. So, Europeans used different sorts of technology that had been developed in the preceding centuries to improve. One of the things that was brought in as a new technology was gunpowder, developed by the Chinese, and improved metallurgy. The Europeans developed cannons and guns. These technologies gave the Europeans an absolute military advantage. Even though the weapons were often inaccurate, in many of the places to which they traveled, these were not seen yet, and subsequently they were able to conquer them. Guns were mounted on the decks of these ships, as well as fired through the holes cut in the sides of the ships. So these guns made them very powerful. Imagine if you had never seen a gun before and someone was shooting a cannon from a ship at you. It'd be a very scary thing. As far as the technologies, let's talk about some of the new ones. The astrolabe was a spin-off of an ancient maritime tool that was used by the Greeks. The tool was used to calculate latitude by computing the distance of the sun or pole star and the horizon. The Europeans later adapted this technology to create the cross staff and back staff, which accomplished a similar task but were easier to use. The computations of latitude was critical in aiding European exploration. The compass was also a Chinese innovation that had diffused through the Eurasian world, and the Europeans used it as one of their most critical navigational tools. The astrolabe was of limited use, particularly if the day was cold, and the magnetic compass provided a reliable alternative. While some viewed the compass superstitiously because of its seemingly magical powers, the compass became a critical, important tool in exploration since it always provided the explorers with a reliable sense of direction. These and other discoveries allowed the Europeans to develop a deeper understanding of the winds and currents of both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. They were able to take advantage of trade winds on both sides of the equator and were able to plan out their voyages. Cartography. Discovering a superior route to Asia for trade required significant map work. For much of the world's existing cartography hindered explorers' ability to discover a water route. If explorers were to know where they were, they needed to be able to pinpoint their location on a map using a grid of some sort, what we have, latitude and longitude, to ascertain their position. At the beginning of the age of exploration, there were several significant types of world maps. The Ptolemaic map was generated by Claudius Ptolemy in the 2nd century. The map on the slide depicts Ptolemy's world in detail, showing Europe, northern Africa, and the Middle East, and some places in Asia in relatively accurate detail. It also recognizes that there were possibly areas that lay beyond the known land, terra incognita. Although it did not note some unknown lands, the map also identified more than 8,000 places in the world that could be depicted in a conical projection. While this map recognized the interconnectedness of the known world, it also indicated that the Indian Ocean was a lake, suggesting that an all-water route to the east was impossible. Another weakness of this map was that it incorrectly computed the circumference of the globe as smaller than it was and noted that China was larger than it actually was. The Jerusalem map was not a map for navigational purposes or to help an explorer find their location on the globe, but was instead essentially a religious document. For Jerusalem was the focus of the map, and the other known parts of the world were drawn in a representative fashion around Jerusalem. The map itself depicted the world as flat, even though few believed that it was truly flat, with Jerusalem at the top of the map. This map made a religious statement about the centrality of Jerusalem and did not provide the European explorers with anything that could possibly be used for navigation. Now, if we look at medieval to Renaissance cartography, we notice a few different changes here. The Portolan map was intended for practical use and contained specific landmarks along European and Mediterranean coast that were actually noted so that one could follow them with a compass. This map enabled sailors to navigate the waters more safely. The map depicted major waterways and harbors, and the maps contained lines that connected the harbors themselves. These lines were important because it showed sailors safe routes that could be used by using the compass to sail from one to another. The weakness of these maps lay in the fact that since they were mainly used for water navigation, they contained very little information about the interior land locations. Fra Maurer's map was the most famous map in the 15th century. Its shape was round, like the Jerusalem map, but Fra Maur added a great deal of information that gave the map credibility. Perhaps most important was the fact that the map noted that Africa could be circumnavigated and the Indian Ocean reached by water routes. So it showed that it was all connected. In 1492, Behaim constructed a globe that indicated that one could get to China by sailing west across the Atlantic. The globe was based on Ptolemy's map and indicated that there was a single ocean separating Europe and Asia in the west. Although inaccurate, both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean lay between Europe and Asia. The globe did inspire explorers. Although Columbus's discovery of the New World in the same year that the globe was created proved that his Behaim was incorrect. The Ptolemaic map experienced a resurgence during the Renaissance. As ancient texts were re-examined, the use of the printing press resulted in the dissemination of the copies of this map, so they were spread out through the world. Although the weaknesses mentioned earlier continued to propagate, Ptolemy's masculinization of the circumference of the globe actually aided exploration, for it convinced explorers like Columbus that sailing around the globe was much less of a task than it really was. So by making it smaller, he convinced more people to travel further. So by the mid to 15th century, maps began to change from previous maps. They were indicated that a water route around Africa might be possible. This had yet to be sustained by European explorers, but rumors were out there.